I stood there, heart pounding, looking at the screen that flashed the words reservation not found. My flight to start my new life, my escape, my fresh beginning on the other side of the country, was gone. Just utterly vanished. I felt the bile rise in my throat as I frantically pulled out my phone. A sudden, horrifying premonition washing over me. That's when the text popped up from my mother, a chilling message that cut deeper than any knife. Have fun walking home, loser. Then, almost immediately, a text from my father followed. Stop acting poor, take a bus like you should. The cruelty, in those simple sentences, the casual dismissal of my entire future, hit me like a physical blow right there in the middle of the bustling airport. They hadn't just canceled my ticket. They had engineered a total public humiliation and left me stranded with nothing but the clothes on my back and a carry-on bag. The worst part, I looked back at the check-in desk, then down at my phone, and then I realized what I had to do next. But was I wrong for what I did to them after they pulled this stunt? Tell me if you would have done the exact same thing to the people who were supposed to love you most. To truly understand why my parents' actions at the airport were the final, unbearable straw, I have to go back to the beginning of my life as the designated disappointment. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, were successful, affluent, and, in their own words, self-made people. My father was a high-powered corporate lawyer, and my mother ran a boutique interior design firm. Their world was defined by luxury, appearances, and the fierce belief that money could solve every problem and justify every cruelty. I, however, was not like them. I was quiet, an art major, and chose to work a series of minimum-wage jobs through college to pay my own way, partly out of necessity, but mostly as a conscious rebellion against their suffocating materialism. They saw my independence as poverty, and my artistic pursuits as a personal affront to their legacy. The constant jabs, the thinly veiled insults, and the open ridicule became the background noise of my life. If I wore anything they deemed cheap, they'd make a joke about the thread count. If I brought home a friend who wasn't from the right family, they'd ask them overly personal questions about their parents' careers. It was a suffocating, passive-aggressive war waged against me daily. The situation escalated dramatically when I graduated. I had been accepted into a highly competitive, fully funded MFA program in a city 3,000 miles away. A perfect opportunity for me to finally get out from under their thumb and start my own life. I was ecstatic. They, on the other hand, saw it as a disaster. Why can't you just work for your father's firm? My mother had wailed, he needs a receptionist and the money is great. My father offered me a hefty, insulting bribe to stay. He promised to buy me a luxury condo and a new car if I would simply give up this art nonsense and get an actual job. I refused, explaining that my passion was more important than their money, which only solidified my status as the family failure. I booked the flight myself, using money I had painstakingly saved from 3 years of working part-time jobs. The ticket was a symbol of my freedom. They knew the date and time, of course. We had a final, tense dinner the night before, where they acted overly cheerful, almost relieved, as if they were finally getting rid of a troublesome houseguest. They even offered to drop me off at the airport, a gesture I mistakenly took as a final olive branch. It turned out to be the perfect setup. They watched me walk into the terminal, waited until I was past security and trying to check in my single suitcase, and then at the last possible moment, they called the airline and used a credit card they still had on file to cancel the ticket, right out from under me. Standing there, the roar of the airport faded into a dull echo. The gate agent looked apologetic but helpless. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "The reservation was canceled just minutes ago by the purchasing party. You'll need to rebook." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. Their texts were confirmation. This was not a mistake. This was deliberate. This was a calculated, vicious attempt to keep me trapped, to humiliate me, and to force me to come crawling back, begging them for help. They wanted to strip me of my dignity, so they could swoop in with a checkbook and reestablish their control. That moment, everything changed. The years of resentment, the constant pressure, the feeling of being an unwanted object in their perfect, sterile life, it all coalesced into a cold, clear determination. They wanted to play games with my future. Fine. I would play a game back, but mine would be for keeps. I quietly stepped away from the counter, found an unoccupied charging station, and took a deep breath. My original plan was ruined, but a much better, much sweeter plan was rapidly taking shape. I had been planning my escape for years. Now I was planning my revenge. I needed 3 things: temporary shelter, a new flight, and a way to hit them where it truly hurt. Their perfect public image and their massive, seemingly untouchable wealth. I still had enough in my savings for a new, immediate flight, but I decided to wait. I was going to make them pay for that new ticket and so much more. The first step was to acknowledge that the only thing my parents cared about was how they were perceived by their peers, the right people. Their wealth was their armor, and their reputation was their shield. I was about to stab them right through their coat of arms. So that's the situation I was in. Stranded at a major international airport, my ticket canceled by my own parents, who were now texting me insults and telling me to act less poor. After robbing me of my flight, I was 22, staring down the barrel of a ruined future, and the only 2 people who were supposed to care about me had just tried to sabotage my life. And they were likely at home right now, sipping expensive wine, laughing about the lesson they had taught their ungrateful son. Before I tell you what happened next, the revenge that absolutely shattered their world, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have just bought a new ticket and gone, letting them win? Or would you have stayed and fought back, risking everything to teach them a lesson they would never forget? Let me know in the comments. What would your first move have been? I needed money, but I needed justice more. And the only way to get true justice from people like them is to make the consequences of their actions far outweigh the satisfaction they got from the initial cruelty. The clock was ticking. They expected me to call them by morning, defeated. I had less than 12 hours to execute my plan. I walked out of the terminal, not to find a bus, but to find a taxi. I directed the driver not to my parents' sprawling mansion, but to the apartment building owned by my paternal grandmother, a sweet woman they had effectively cut out of their lives after she disapproved of their extravagant spending and general coldness. She was my only I left, and she had an emergency fund she'd told me about years ago. My grandmother, seeing my tear-stained face and hearing the whole story, was furious. She immediately booked me a flight for the very next day, a flight they wouldn't know about. More importantly, she gave me the key to an old safety deposit box she kept. "They need to be taught a lesson, dear," she said, her voice shaking with righteous anger. "They value appearances above all else. Break their appearance." Inside the box wasn't much cash, but there was a file detailing some highly irregular business expenses my father had been running through his law firm, which amounted to a serious case of tax fraud and, more interestingly, a large, undisclosed transfer to a shell corporation used to pay for my mother's extravagant design contracts that never seemed to result in any actual finished work. It was enough to raise a lot of very inconvenient questions. That night, I didn't sleep. I executed phase 2. I went to a local print shop and printed out 200 simple flyers, using a design that looked official, like an eviction notice or a legal warning. The heading was simply, *** notice of financial irregularity, ***. The body read, "The cancellation of a major airline ticket by Robert and Eleanor, last name against their own son. My name, to obstruct his educational opportunity, demonstrates a severe lack of ethical conduct and potential financial instability. Is this the character of the individuals you trust with your legal or design contracts? Further inquiries into financial disclosures will be made public." I listed my father's firm's address and my mother's business website. My flight was set for 8 a.m. At 6 a.m., I went to their neighborhood, the exclusive, gate-guarded community, where every home cost upwards of $3 million. While most of their neighbors were on their morning run or reading the paper, I systematically taped my flyers to every mailbox, utility pole, and gate post on their entire block and on surrounding streets where their most important clients and friends lived. I also took a photo of the house with one of the notices prominently taped to the front gate and sent it to a local investigative reporter I had interned for, along with the contents of my grandmother's file anonymously. I wasn't just hitting them, I was using the only weapon they respected, public disgrace. As I sat on the train heading back to the airport, I turned on my phone. The first call was from my mother. I ignored it, then a string of frantic caps-lock texts. What did you do to the mailboxes? You will regret this. Call US now. Then my father called, his voice not angry, but absolutely terrified. Son, what is this nonsense about financial irregularity? The IRS is calling me. Take those flyers down, or I swear I will personally see you disinherited and homeless. I smiled for the first time in months. I texted him back one simple line, have fun walking home, loser, I'm taking the bus. A few hours later, I was on my flight, watching the city disappear below me. As soon as I landed, the calls and texts intensified, but this time they were panicked and pleading. The reporter had run a soft story about affluent family disputes leading to professional scrutiny, and the combination of the flyers and the article was causing an absolute frenzy in their small, snobby world. My father's firm was facing an internal investigation, and my mother had lost her two biggest contracts, the ones that, according to the file, were most tied up in the irregularities. They had destroyed my ticket. I had destroyed their reputation. The aftermath was exactly what I had hoped for. I went radio silent, focusing entirely on my new life and my art program. They were too busy fighting a PR nightmare and a legal audit to bother me. 6 months later, I got a registered letter. They had sold their house and downsized to a much smaller, less ostentatious place. My father had taken an early retirement package, which was essentially a forced resignation, and my mother was trying to rebrand her business in a completely different city, far from the scandal. They were humbled, financially hurt, and most importantly, they were ignored by the very people whose opinions they valued most. I never spoke to them again, except for a final, curt exchange with my father where he tried to apologize, not for the cruelty, but for letting things escalate. I simply said, the only thing that escalated was the truth, and I don't need your money or your ticket anymore. My life is now my own. I'm thriving in my program, supported by my grandmother, and I'm happier than I've ever been. I learned that you can't fight wealthy bullies with kindness or logic. You have to fight them with their own weapons. So that's the whole miserable story, and the sweet taste of poetic justice I got to savor. They try to strand me, make me crawl, and destroy my future out of spite and control. But all they did was hand me the ammunition I needed to finally free myself. It was the most shocking and selfish act of betrayal I've ever experienced, but it also became the moment I truly found my spine. Like this video, if you were on my side, and think my revenge was completely justified. Subscribe for more stories like this one, because trust me, there are plenty more shocking stories out there just waiting to be told. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole messy situation in the comments section below. I want to read what you think about my parents' cruelty and whether or not I went too far. I'll see you all in the next story.